My guest is Arianna Huffington. Her latest book is called Right is Wrong. It's published by Knopf, and in it you still seem to have a soft spot for the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan. Don't all of the people who have followed the all the people you've criticized here see him as their role model?
Well, what's happening is that there's a huge, huge difference between the party of Ronald Reagan, and God knows there's plenty to criticize there, and the party of George Bush that has been taken over by the lunatic fringe of the right. They're the people who don't believe in evolution and believe in torture. They're the people who had a debate early on in this process, and the moderator asked the candidates to raise their hand if they did not believe in evolution, and 3 of them did. I have 2 teenage daughters, and I wanted them to be basically sent off and made to read their science books, because the problem with the current right is that it is basically refusing to accept that facts exist, that truth exists, and there is reality. So it's really the same thing that we see again and again, whether it's Iraq or tax cuts. They don't want to look at the facts.
But why do you think there's a certain response, a positive response to that? Ben Stein has a new movie out that also questions evolution. You have Ann Coulter, who you write about a bit in this book, who says outrageous things, and yet she keeps on being invited back on all of those cable television shows and even the mainstream media, and she sells millions of books.
Well, that's exactly the point I'm making, that it's time for the mainstream media to stop inviting Ann Coulter back.
Do you want them to censor her,
no,
or
I
just
don't think that's censorship.
disinvite her?
No, I think it's, you have the choice who you invite to your show. If you had not invited me, that wouldn't mean you're censoring me. I'm still free to go to any number of other shows or go online or whatever. Every producer and every host has the right. It's your platform. So that's what I'm saying. That's not censorship. I think the point I'm making is that the so-called mainstream media have basically internalized a lot of the right-wing talking points. And we saw that at the ABC debate when George Stephanopoulos and Charlie Gibson, hardly members of the right, asked completely trivial, unnecessary questions about lapel pins and 60s radicals. We saw it when the New York Times hired Bill Kristol.
Let's stop for a second. Do you think they did that because they saw it as signs of integrity? They were going to ask the tough questions even if they perhaps didn't think that those were important issues?
I don't consider them tough questions. I consider them trivializing questions. And as a result, the tough questions were not asked. The tough questions are, what are we going to do about Iraq? And how are we going to deal with the housing crisis? These are the truly tough questions. And, we have another example of the media's complicity that I write a lot about in the book, and that's the New York Times breaks a major story last Sunday about the Pentagon using quote-unquote military analysts to feed them their talking points, to go out there on mainstream media and feed their propaganda to the American people. I think this is a major scandal. That was done at taxpayer expense, and yet there has been a media blackout since then.
I mean, other people haven't picked it up.
No, other people haven't picked it up.
The Times has been accused in the past of not picking up other people's stories. That's because it wasn't theirs. And that is a problem in the press as well.
But the cable news always pick up stories that are not theirs. They don't do their own
So
investigations.
do you think it's a form of censorship? They're just ignoring the story and hoping it'll go away?
Yeah, because there's a complicity. The media were complicit. We know that many in the media, high up, knew what was happening. So obviously they do not want to expose their own complicity.
There's another thing that you object to, and that is always presenting both sides of the story, though there are 2 sides to every story.
Yes. As you know, the first title of my first chapter is Equal Time for Lies. And we see that again and again. There aren't 2 sides to global warming. There are multiple sides as to what to do about global warming. But for years, and still now, we're debating global warming as though it's legitimate to have, on the one hand, say Al Gore, talking about the dangers of global warming, and on the other hand, Senator James Inhofe, telling us that global warming is a fraud. And that's what I call the Pontius Pilate media, washing their hands off and saying, work it out.